This is Advanced Autonomy. I'm Luke Renner. It's Women's History Month, so today we're going to do something a little different. I'm handing over hosting duties to my colleague Niki Bossonis, and she's going to lead a discussion with a few other Cyngn women. It's a frank conversation about the gender pay gap, how assertive women are allowed to be in the workplace, and what makes them hopeful about how corporate America is changing. We hope you like it.
This is Advanced Autonomy. I'm Niki Bossonis, and I'm here with the Women of Cyngn, Emily McNamara, Azalea Phangsoa, and Ashley Hemmingway. At Cyngn, Emily is the head of operations, Azalea is on the product team, and Ashley is an engineer. Emily, Azalea, Ashley, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So since we're recording on Equal Pay Day, I was just reading that a 2021 report that men make an average of 25% more than women, even still today. I remember a decade and a half ago when that number was closer to 50% more, but we're creeping up there, but it still exists. Have any of you encountered any pay gap bias or issues in your career?
I think for me, I was really, for my first job at least, I was really just kind of desperate to fit into the engineering space. So kind of did not do any of that negotiation because once an opportunity came up, I was just really jumped on it and didn't really think about the negotiation. And then after a couple of months of that position, talking to a coworker of mine who is less experienced than I did in engineering in the space in general, and found out actually that he was making a lot more than I was. It was kind of an eye-opener. So once I left that job and moved on to Cyngn, I kind of had that shattered a little bit of the imposter syndrome that I think a lot of women have, for me at least, and that, my qualifications are enough and I do bring a lot to the table. So able to negotiate a little bit better and kind of realize my worth in that.
I don't think I've experienced any pay cut from what I understand, but I do remember negotiating my first salary, being very cognizant of, trying to make sure I knew my value and knew what I should be asking for. I think typically I've had a lot of male peers and colleagues have a very aggressive and ambitious approach to how they negotiate, and it wasn't something that was my style, but I was aware of it could sometimes get results. So trying to find a way to sort of navigate how I could advocate for myself in a way that I felt comfortable and still assertive.
That's another important point to bring up, is that we have to be cognizant of a potential pay gap before even encountering one. We know that potential exists.
I think for the younger generation, at least, people are just more cognizant about teaching us that we need to be more assertive about these things. I know I had my advisor in college was actually another woman, and she, when I was getting to junior, senior year and starting to really look for jobs that would be after college, she kind of made it very clear to me the kind of things that I can expect and how you need to be more assertive and put yourself out there in ways, especially when asking for compensation as a woman, how it might be different than being a man. So I'm just very grateful for that. Really fortunate that kind of had some insight before entering this blindly.
I'm curious, Emily, when you've been on the side of, the compensation and you're the company and people are asking what have you noticed guys and girls or men and women, I guess, negotiate differently?
I haven't noticed actually a vast difference when I do speak to women and men. The women that I have encountered, such as yourself, Ashley, you guys have a certain presence to you. I think there is a level of confidence coming in versus I think some people that, have been out in the work field for a while. Under Niki, I think you and I had a very good conversation, and I think it's a little different. I'm not saying that, younger employees, for example, tend to have a level of confidence that's different than people that have been out in the work field for a little while, such as myself, because we've had, we were a part of that transitional phase, I think, where you're seeing more and more women in tech, more and more women in executive roles. And with media and everything else that's out there now, it's more widespread. You see more people, more women out there that are very successful, that are recognized for the good work that they do. And they're being compared to other men counterparts, not necessarily just other women.
When I was in undergrad taking a business course, the instructor bought me a book. And he said, you're going to be very successful. He said, but I want to prepare you. And the book was How to Be an Assertive, Not Aggressive Woman. He said, if you are just matter of fact and just speak your mind plainly, you will be perceived as aggressive.
Doesn't that already speak to a little bit of the bias? And I think the intentions were good behind them giving you that book. But, that's part of I think the reason why we feel that level of intimidation, because, in society, I think that there feels a need to, kind of call out that difference, or to say, hey, I know you've had, you're a woman and you're in this industry and you need some extra help, those types of things. I think even a leg up because you're a woman, or we want to fill a quota, or we don't have enough women and therefore you're the token woman of the company, those types of things. When you're definitely someone that they call out. I think that it does make you more self-conscious about the fact that you're recognized in that way, and not necessarily just because your performance and you're someone that's great for the company. It's also kind of something in the back of your mind that, hey, perhaps I was hired because I am a woman and I'm filling a quota, or there is some extra something that's been given, or recognition, or that person may assume that you have a problem with with these conversations because you're a woman, whether they're right or wrong, knowing that delineation happened already speaks to the fact that that there is that difference.
I have been told 2 or 3 times in my career that, like, oh, like, this seems sort of difficult, or like, oh, watch out for this person, but you should be just fine, if you're super sweet, and they'll love you anyways. I'm a little bit more aggressive, and so I think if you're you bring a cute smile, it'll be fine. And I'm like, I think, like, this was like early, like, couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's sort of like my, like, in a tech industry and working in a male dominated area, maybe that's my breath of fresh air that I bring to the team or the industry, but also just sort of like how that's assumed that I'll be acting that way, or that's what's going to convince someone or persuade them, or you walk into a meeting and that's how you're going to influence. It felt a little undercutting, just a little bit, that was sort of the approach that would be acceptable for them to perceive me by.
Well, it's what's expected of women, I think, in general. Like, you're supposed to be sweet or cute or kind and supportive, and not necessarily, if it might be great for a man to be more aggressive or a man to be more assertive. But, we do come from a society where women are supposed to be seen, not heard. I think that's, long time ago, but at the same time, I think those are some things that are still pretty ingrained in society. So you might have, professionals that mean well, but say things like this to you thinking it's a compliment, but really you're looking at it like, well, how would you feel if I called you cute, or, asked you to be, perky, and, I mean, I don't know that would go well.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think I read this article where it's like, those comments, maybe they're not that bad, you don't have to, like, tell HR about it. They're sort of compliments, but then they're sort of like, if you get comments like that all the time, where it sort of becomes like this, like, death by a million cuts.
Because you don't want to end up getting put in a box, right? You don't want to end up being the person that's always sweet, but then it's kind of a double-edged sword and a really thin line, because you're either the person that's sweet, or if you're a woman, at least labeled bossy, or even the B word. It's kind of one or the other in a thin line. It's really hard to kind of tiptoe that and stay being respected and not one of the other.
You mentioned earlier about filling a quota. And I think there was a time when equal opportunity employment first started being implemented in the late 80s, early to mid 90s, that there was that sense of, oh, we're just hiring women to fill a quota. I think nowadays there are companies that just want to be balanced employees, that want to be diverse and well-rounded. I wonder if there's a way to get that message across in recruiting as well, that this is the company we want to be, and it's not,
Yeah, I think we definitely could do that. It really just takes, I think, good communication and listening to, the people around you, and being cognizant of what, of the times and the workplace that we're living, or we're living in now. I think that if we clearly communicate that we are about diversity and wanting to, have a good balance in the workplace, that's all fine and good, as long as we're also projecting that we're not making some special exception because you're a woman or because you're a minority. We're not going to go and roll out some, I think it's okay. I think it's fine that we still have special programs to, bring those things up, bring up more women in tech. I think calling them out is fine. I think until we reach that time where things are equal, you're still going to need that extra boost to kind of put them in the forefront. But I wouldn't necessarily say that we need to single them out in terms of their qualifications. I think one of the things that we want to have equal is that you're looking at me as, equal to a male counterpart with the same qualifications, and say that you're hiring me because I'm better, and not necessarily because, oh, she gets an extra 2 points because she's a woman. Now, I think naturally there are some companies that are going to hire due to the fact that, hey, we really don't have very many women in our company, and it's going to be a nice offset. But that can't be the resounding reason. I think that, you need to know that, hey, you truly qualify, and you hired me because I qualify for the role. But it's nice to have the fact that you are a woman, because that does help bring balance to the company. But again, it has to be clearly communicated, and in a way where you're really not making someone feel individualized or separated simply because you're a woman.
Right. Like getting hired or being included just because you're a woman is still being left out, because you're not, if you're getting hired just because you're a woman somewhere, maybe you're not the best person for the job, it's going to be really isolating in itself, because you're not going to have any idea what's going on. But going back to what Emily was saying about like how we can kind of single people out until it is finally equal. I just wanted to bring up that quote from, I think it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who, when they asked her, how many women is enough to have on the Supreme Court? And she's like, it's not enough until everyone's woman on the Supreme Court, and it's not a big deal. So I think it's kind of like that, reaching that point of where we can stop kind of singling out women and looking for them when it's not a big deal that they're there.
I completely agree. That was great, Ashley.
Thanks.
And I love Ruth, so thank you for quoting Ruth. For sure.
I'd like to mention a time 10 years ago when I worked for a tech company, and we acquired another company, and the president and VP of sales for that company called the female marketing employees into a room, not the male, and they wanted to make sure we understood the product that we were marketing and that we'd be able to do the job. But we were already doing it. Like we were all, so we had to literally prove to them, yes, see this, content piece, we wrote that. And we walked out of there feeling like, well, that was really strange, really discriminatory. But we felt that we couldn't say anything because it wasn't a gross enough violation to risk how we were perceived in the workplace. There was still 10 years ago a time when you could say, oh, she's just making noise. She's just calling, she's a troublemaker. Don't be careful what you say around her. When that was clear discrimination. So I think nowadays we can say, hey, why did you call the women into that meeting and question our knowledge? Why didn't you question the men on the team? And you can go to HR and you'd get, backup for that.
Absolutely. It would be nice to see those changes happening organically, and also because it's the right thing to do. And this is what we're seeing more of, versus a fear that you're going to be canceled, or, the company's going to be called out, or something negative is going to happen, working out of, fear that if we don't recognize women, if we don't, have more diversity, if we don't have this, then, it's going to be bad for business. I would like to see those changes, because Azalea and Ashley, Niki, we're having children, or we are influencing others in the next generation. And we're the ones teaching them, hey, this is what the norm is. The other stuff is what's not normal and dated, and we've learned from that, and that we're different, and we're better for it. And that speaks to the workplace, that speaks to home life, that speaks to all things out there that we've experienced kind of, where women have not, necessarily been recognized in an equal fashion.
I don't know if anybody's seen The Good Place, but it's like where the points don't count if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If you're doing it just to make your points better, it doesn't count. But if you are actually acting as a good person, then that's what counts to your point total. So it's kind of like if you're like any of the companies who are like Emily said, just trying to do something to not get canceled or just to kind of seem good on paper. I think it's really easy to see through that as a woman, and I think that those companies are going to continue to struggle with their diversity versus, we can tell in a place where you're genuinely wanted or not. It's really, we don't, they're known to be underestimating, like we can see through this. So
I agree. I'll reference a 2021 culture report that showed that 41% of women do not feel included or engaged in their workplace. And I think those women are going to seek other opportunities, and those companies that allow that disengagement are going to have a higher churn rate. So as we start to bring this discussion to a close, I'd like to ask, are there any women in business and tech in general that have inspired you?
Well, Ashley already mentioned Ruth. I think she's kind of the ultimate there. Can't say enough good things about, what she's been for us, our society in general. Also being in Silicon Valley, there's plenty of women out here. I think that I've encountered, whether they're support staff or engineer, that has been quite inspiring because they're strong women. They're not, it's not that they're extra loud or outspoken. It's just that they are who they are, and you're proud to have any association or have had, walked the same path as them. I think that you find inspiration in various places, and I find Azalea, Niki, Ashley, all of you very inspiring in different ways. It's about looking for those positive things and not necessarily leaning on the differences, but more, what makes you shine and what makes you that special individual that I'd like to work with. So, in terms of recruiting and staffing up at Cyngn, I think the Cyngn philosophy and our culture, what we embrace specifically is to not make, some delineation in that way, but more like what makes you special, what makes you an outlier, what makes you a great contributor to Cyngn. And I try to not really, look specifically at, the fact that you're a female. Great that you are, because I love, working with men and women, but that I really just think that, at the core of it, when we're, looking at these people that we're around here, there's something inspiring in all the women that we're working with. Yeah.
At my first job out here in Silicon Valley, I felt, again, was one of the only women working there. And actually one of my first managers was also a woman. And I got extremely inspired by her on how to be someone that works in tech and a woman at the same time. Like she was super into yoga, and she wasn't shy about that. Would invite everyone to her yoga classes and baked cookies and brought them in, and just did not hide any of herself away. Like if people were talking about video games, or which was often the case, she would kind of be in the conversation, but then also not afraid to share who she was. So that kind of inspired me to open up a little bit more with different people, and they will be receptive to it, and we can all learn from each other's differences.
I don't know if this sounds too cheesy, but I think one of my biggest role models is my mom, and I think a lot of moms that I see, in the tech industry or in the workforce, because I guess my mom was a very hardworking person, but I feel like it's there's this sort of thought in my head is how do you balance that work life and family life. And I think there's a lot of, we have a couple in our office who, love talking about their kids and love planning things for their weekends and after work. And, there's also fathers out there too on our team and all that stuff. But, I think it's just knowing how, I guess, my mom worked very hard and was successful in her career and put in the hours and the extra effort for her coworkers, and she was such a wonderful person to be around. But also she never, she always attended all my soccer games, and she was, cooked me food and was a great mom too. Just the balance of being able to find it all and have it all, live up to society's expectations of what, a mom could be, but also, the expectations of what a woman should be in the workforce. I think I have a lot of respect for, being able to, have it all and strive for, living their best life, and, still being very successful in all aspects of their life. Mm-hmm.
I had another example of a woman that inspired me. And when you brought up your mom, my heart just skipped a couple beats. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and one day she decided she wanted to be an accountant. And she just started taking college classes while she took care of us in the home. And I was a accelerated student, so I was in college during high school. And I would see my mom in the hallway between classes. I was going to college like with my mom. And she eventually became assistant director of finance at British Petroleum in Rockefeller Center in New York. And like I would go to visit my mom at work so that I could watch the tree lighting ceremony from her office in Rockefeller Plaza. So yeah, she just taught me that, like, you know, there's no bias. You just work hard and you get your education and you go for it, and you'll get there eventually, even though it took her years to do, you know, get her BS on the side. You know, it's there. So thank you for reminding me about my mom.
My mom too. And absolutely. I think we turned out great because, you know, we've had some great influences. I do want to point out one more thing, though, because I think that as much as we're talking about how we want to be equal and there's these biases about being women, I also think that it's a good thing to embrace our womanhood and embrace the fact that we do have at the core, you know, certain qualities that make us a woman and make us, you know, who we are, and allow us to be strong in our ways and men to be strong in their ways. You know, I think having that recognition, but not allowing that to hold us back or be delineated in a negative way is kind of the resounding message here. If you're proud to, like you're speaking about your mother, you know, there's a nurturing nature, you know, knowing that's there and that, you know, you grow from that. And then how that applies to your professional life, you know, all of that matters. But just to say that, you know, we were focusing more on our powers, our positivity, all the things that are good about being a man or a woman or, you know, whatever you identify yourself as. I think just embracing that part of you and growing from that is the most important part.
I think there's this stereotype of like, oh, you know, in being in a male-dominated industry, it's a little bit more aggressive. Maybe there's a little bit more, I think you come across maybe a couple more egos, and there's, you know, just sort of a different dynamic when there's a room full of men. And then, you know, being a woman coming into the spaces, they're like, okay, make sure you stand your ground, make sure you're tough, make sure you're hard on everyone. And, you know, sometimes I sort of think like, oh, maybe they need to be a little bit more empathetic. Maybe they need to embrace a little bit more compassion. Maybe we would go farther with some of those traits, you know, as a team. And perhaps that's why, you know, it's so important to have balance of like males and females in the room and on a team, because, you know, it's important to have, you know, those traits as well, and being able to offer those to the team and being able to have, you know, as much as a woman can be, you know, aggressive and advocate and, you know, go head toe to toe with, you know, really strong personalities. I think it's also great when you can see, you know, men come to the other side of that and embrace being a little more vulnerable and, you know, kinder and gentler with, you know, what their intentions are and how they're trying to make their point come across. And I think that's something that, you know, having women on the team, women in the workforce really offers a lot of team dynamics.
Very well said. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing. This was amazing. I hope we can do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.